What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to part 5 of my 2022 reading tier list, where I, as the name suggests, rank in the tier list all of the books that I read over the course of 2022. This is going to be the final part of this, a series that I was hoping and anticipating would only be 3 videos, but because I like to talk a lot, ended up being 5. So I don't really have much more to say in preface, that's not a word. In preface to this is that I guess I'll just reiterate the one rule or the one stipulation that I've put on this tier list, being that all of this has been off the top of my head. Recording each video more or less back to back. I've been going through, none of this was predetermined or planned. None of these placements were like, I know exactly where this is going ahead of time, except for some of the really obvious ones. As you might, have been able to tell by a couple options last time and a couple of options that you might see in this video. Obviously, if you have not checked out the other 4 videos in this beforehand, I recommend obviously checking those out so you know how I got to the point that I have gotten to in this so far. But without further ado, let's go ahead and do the final part of this tier list. Starting off today with The Haunting of Hill House by not by Mary, it's not Mary Shelley, it's Shirley Jackson. That's who it was. Mary Shelley did Frankenstein. Haunting of Hill House is one that before reading it I thought was a lot more I'm not sure the word that I'm trying to think of here. It a lot more common in how people enjoyed it. I thought it seems to be a very popular book generally speaking, but I thought there would be a lot more ratings that were a lot higher for it. Since reading it, especially reading it alongside of other people, I've discovered that there's a little bit of a something about The Haunting of Hill House that some people don't really enjoy so much, and that thing being primarily characters. I know some friends who were not huge on characters or character interactions. They thought that a lot of that was weird. To me, I didn't really get that vibe a whole lot. My initial rating for the book was 5 out of 5, but then I gave it a 4 out of 4 just a couple days later because 5 seemed somewhat excessive for the book. I enjoyed it, and it did have a couple cool, spooky moments in it. And it gave me a great vibe of, just kind of the time period that it was, just approximately, because like I grew up watching Abbott and Costello, and uh, just the way that characters spoke kind of put me into a mindset of thinking about a time period like that. So it got me in the time period pretty easily. But in terms of how good it is, I enjoyed it, but overall quality, I think I'm going to have to put it down below a little bit where I would initially be inclined to put it, somewhere around rough around the edges. I think I'm going to put it just above Master and Margarita, though, because Master and Margarita is one that is like pretty difficult to recommend unless it's to somebody who enjoys magical realism, especially, because that book is weird. Haunting of Hill House is a little bit goofy in some places, but it's not like unapproachable. And additionally, Haunting of Hill House is super short, so it's like I recommend reading it to see how much you enjoy it, but it's definitely not top quality, especially compared to many of the other things I read this year. Next up was Rebecca, which I also read in October for spooky season, which it isn't really a spooky book. It's got a lot of suspense in it, it's got a little bit of romance, and the pacing is not fantastic. The first, I don't know, half to 2/3 of this book are so slow. It's really, really, really hard to get into. But once it gets good, it gets fantastic. The end of this book is amazing. I loved pretty much everything about the climax and finale, like everything from where the twist occurs, because there is a twist in this book. Everything from where that twist occurs till the very end is like chef's kiss. It is amazing. But everything before that is really, really messy. Because of that, I feel like I have to put Rebecca. I'm trying to debate between whether it should be rough around the edges or I'm pretty dang good, because the first 2/3 of it are super slow. Yeah, I'm gonna put it here. And now that we're in the last one of this, I guess I am actually just gonna go ahead and fix this. Everybody who is potentially raged at me having Dune in the rough around the edges, I'm gonna go ahead and move it to the very bottom of pretty dang good, because it is not in the same category as all the rest of these books that I have in this rough around the edges category. It deserves to be in pretty dang good if it even if it does have some slight minor issues with it that make me like it less than the rest of the books in this category. But I think Rebecca definitely deserves to be up here because the ending is truly fantastic, even if the rest of it is really slow and not great. Next up, we have The Odyssey by Homer. Oh, sorry. The Odyssey was another one that I enjoyed. I don't know if it blew me away the same way that the Iliad did, just because I wasn't expecting the Iliad to be so good, but I am very familiar with the tale of the Odyssey. Not only very many of the stories within it, so to speak, different sections of it, so stuff like Polyphemus and the Golden Fleece, or, well, the Golden Fleece isn't in this book, but Polyphemus is. And other, small portions of this book I knew a lot about ahead of time. Plus, I had read a graphic novel version of the Odyssey back when I was in middle school, I think, and that was amazing. So I was already very familiar with the story of the Odyssey, whereas I was not at all familiar with the Iliad. So the Odyssey didn't quite blow me away the same way, but it was still very, very good, and I'm going to put it in cream of the crop because it definitely deserves to be up there, but this time Rockio edges out Homer. So, next up is Tales of the Sun Eater Volume 1, a collection of short stories from the Sun Eater universe. This I really enjoyed. There were a few stories that I didn't absolutely adore. One of them being the very last story, which is quite strange in the way that it's written and the type of framing device that it uses, but that was totally intentional. And was still very satisfying in its own way, but there are a couple stories in this collection that I absolutely love. One of them especially being Parliament of Owls. Parliament of Owls might just be my favorite Sun Eater work, period. And if it's not, it's definitely in the top 3 favorites up to this point that I have read through, because it is amazing. As such, for this balance, I'm going to go ahead and put it really high up here and pretty dang good. I'll put it in between the Riordan stuff, because there are a few stories that aren't complete perfection, but there's a few stories that are just as good as anything in the main series. And then, like I said, Parliament of Owls is very, 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 very good. So if you're somebody who has not read the short story collections of Sun Eater, I highly recommend you do that as well. Next up was something that took me a little bit of time to get through, that being The Wandering Inn, which I did on audio. Now, I said, might have been the last video, might have been in the last couple videos, that I don't do audio a whole lot, because it tends to not be the way that I tend to enjoy reading. Whenever I have time to listen to something, I usually prefer to listen to music. But when I went through the Another Kingdom trilogy by Andrew Klavan on audio, I decided, hey, I guess I can do audio sometimes. So what if I do audio for something like The Wandering Inn, where I'm mildly interested in it, but I would never read it online because I don't like reading books on screens or e-reading or anything like that, and something that I would not, spend that much time reading. It's not a priority of sorts that I would actually go about reading it when I have so much else that I would rather read instead. So The Wandering Inn I justified as being, okay, let's do this one on audio instead. And I will say Wandering Inn surprised me. There are elements that are pretty annoying, especially a couple characters that are not the most enjoyable to be in the head in and listen to some of the time, especially in the very beginning of the book. And there was a couple chapters where I was nearly so annoyed with the way that a couple characters were behaving that I nearly quit the audiobook. But the ending actually was really good, and the author made some decisions with it that really caught me off guard in ways I was like, okay, I heavily respect this. Not many people would decide to do that, especially after spending so much time in this world. It's very slow-paced, very slice of life, and that was something that I enjoyed as well, because I don't read a whole lot that has that kind of feeling to it. I will say that because of some of those annoying bits, I'll put it down here and rough around the edges, but I will say that The Wandering Inn did surprise me a lot, and it has many 5-star moments for sure. It's not terrible. It's just got a little bit of annoying nature to it at times. Finally, let's get to the second major chonker that I read this year after War and Peace, that being Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. And There's not enough good things in the world that I can say about this book. Even the tangents, the constant tangents, I loved. Like, there was only a couple sections of Les Miserables that I can say I disliked. One of those being the Waterloo section at the very beginning of part two, or volume two, or book part two. I think it's part two. Waterloo, I didn't love when I read it. In fact, I didn't like it at all when I read it. But over the rest of the story, I start to appreciate and enjoy it more because certain ramifications of certain things that you discover in there um, are important for other characters and other moments that happen throughout the story. And then the first few books of part three, I didn't love because they felt like they were too meandery and weren't getting to the point of what I wanted them to get to. But now looking back on it, I'm sure if I reread Les Mis at some point in the future that I would adore everything about this. Like even the tangents on like slang and the sewers and the nuns that a lot of people hate. Even slang I didn't dislike. Like it was interesting. I don't know enough French for it to mean anything to me, but I didn't dislike it. But pretty much everything about Les Mis was dang near perfection to me. And to a certain degree, it is up there for being one of the biggest surprises of the year for me. Where American Psycho, my enjoying it so much, might be the biggest surprise of the year. Les Mis might be the second biggest surprise of the year, and I'm going to put it at the very tip top cream of the crop. Even with the tangents, Les Mis is incredible, and even if you don't like the tangents, the main story is so worth experiencing. The tangents are worth pushing through regardless. I just loved this thing to pieces. Next up, the next thing that I actually finished was A Christmas Carol and Other Christmas Writings. Now, obviously, with that being said, where I would rank A Christmas Carol on its own and where I would rank this collection are going to be a little bit different because this collection is made up of several writings that were just didn't mean anything to me and that I didn't fully understand the point of and just were not great at all. That make it like definitely rough around the edges part, like the collection. I'm gonna have to say that this collection definitely belongs like here, but I'm going to give A Christmas Carol and Other Christmas Writings a different placement on this chart, as if I'm cutting out the writings that basically don't matter. So if you only read like the actual legit stories and the actual legit stories that are like good in my opinion, those being the story of the goblin who stole a sexton, A Christmas Carol, and whatever it's called, The Haunted Man and A Ghost Bargain. Those three stories are amazing. In fact, the first chapter of The Haunted Man might be my favorite thing in the whole collection. The Goblin Who Stole a Sexton might be my second favorite thing in the collection. Then A Christmas Carol is phenomenal, and just the themes of and whatnot of The Haunted Man and A Christmas Carol are amazing to a degree that I'm going to go ahead and put A Christmas Carol and Other Writings up here in pretty dang good, because what is good in this collection is so good to me, whereas everything else is so nothing that I would put those independent writings in like Better Luck Next Time, like they just don't matter to me. I will certainly reread A Christmas Carol, The Haunted Man, and The Story of the Goblin Who Stole the Sexton in years to come, but I don't think I'll ever touch any of the rest of the writings in this collection ever again if I had to. So that is where I'll put it, but only because I'm giving it a boost because of the good stuff in it. Finally, let's get to Demon in White by Christopher Ruocchio, book 3 of The Sun Eater. I just finished this morning, so part of this is definitely going to be like, recency bias is going to play a part in this. But the thing was, the entire time that I was reading Demon in White, I was going back and forth with myself in my head, basically having arguments in my head about whether I enjoyed Howling Dark or Demon in White more. And the edge for pretty much the entire time that I was reading Demon in White was Howling Dark. Until the very last chapter of Demon in White, in which case some stuff goes down, and I just got all up in the chills and, goosebumps and whatnot that make Demon in White barely edge out Howling Dark. Like, it is such a very, 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 very small degree that Demon in White beats out Howling Dark that it is unfair for me to be ranking them. It's just so difficult to do that. But even then, for whatever reason, I also feel like I have to put it above the Iliad as well. I don't know why that is, but that's just how I feel like I have to rank that. So to have, a couple, two Christopher Rocchio and two Homer here in the top 5 is actually really kind of cool to see. Both of those are very incredible. So that's where I'm going to put Demon in White, but man, trying to decide between Howling Dark and Demon in White was pretty much impossible. In fact, little bits of me want to put Howling Dark above, but like, I mean, if we were including the title and the cover art in, part of how I decided to rank these, I would probably put Howling Dark above Demon in White just because I love the art and the title a lot more than in Demon in White. But for the story content, that's where I'm going to have to rank them for now. But you'll also notice that there are a couple more things down here. Well, that's because Tides of War was a book that I started this year, but I actually DNF'd. I'm not somebody who DNFs books. In fact, I do still have the intention of someday going back and either restarting or just straight up finishing Tides of War, because I want to give it the benefit of the doubt to see if the rest of it, can increase my feelings on the book, because the main problem that I had with Tides of War is that it's hilariously complex. Like, the framing device is kind of absurd and stupid. It isn't just a character recounting their tale. It is a character recounting another character's recounting of another character's recounting of another person's tale. And if that didn't make sense to you, good. It shouldn't. It was a stupid framing device, and I'm a little bit still salty about it because it just didn't make sense to do it this way. But I will give it the benefit of the doubt and try to finish reading it someday. But for now, this is my first DNF. In my new reading journey, this is my first DNF so far. And it's going to remain that way for a little bit. And then, of course, I have Tales of the Sun Eater Volume 2 down here. But, I didn't actually want to put this in the list. Oh, no. No, I didn't want to put this in the list. Ah! Oh, well, I'm just going to have to pretend that it's not in there. Whoops, that wasn't supposed to end up in the list. But regardless, Tales of the Sun Eater Volume 2, I was supposed to read this year, but as today being the very last day of December, and I just barely finished Demon in White this morning, I actually did not have enough time to be able to read it this year, which disappoints me, but I didn't. So I'm just going to have to pretend that this is not in the list. I don't know why it's not letting me take it off. That is kind of aggravating. Let me go ahead and, can I add a new tier? Settings. Yes, let me add a row below. And let me go ahead and call this Didn't Read Yet. Call it that and put Sun Eater in there because holy cow, that wasn't supposed to end up in the list. So there we go. That works for me. So let me know what you think of my ranking. If you absolutely hate it, I honestly understand because there are a lot of hot takes in this. And over the course of the videos, I said a lot of things that are like, I don't know if I want to publish these videos anymore, but I'm going to do it anyway. So if you watched all of these tier lists, like I said, let me know what you think of my ranking. Let me know how you would rank some of these things instead, given that my opinions are quite polarizing with some of these books, I can tell. Thank you guys for watching. As always, though, if you got it through all of these, I definitely very much appreciate it. For now, though, that is going to be the end of my 2022 reading tier list. If you enjoyed it, I hope you decide to come back to the channel to watch other stuff, including my book reviews. If you want to hear more in-depth my feelings on a lot of these books, since I review almost everything that I read. There's several classics that I haven't reviewed yet, but most everything I read I actually cover on the channel. So if you want to, you can definitely stick around for some of that, and I'll greatly appreciate that. So thank you guys for watching. I'll be back again in the next video.